So when this whole quarantine thing started for me, I thought I was going to have so much time to review films that I'd be reviewing more than ever before. But the reality is that I'm around a bunch of people, including my daughters. So not only are my daughters here with me at my father's house right now, because we're all kind of grouping together so we don't all go stir crazy. But my daughters are asleep here in this bed next to me, and I have nowhere else to film at night, and I can't film at the day, during the day with them, and then at night, everybody wants to hang out, so I end up watching movies with them, and plus I have the internet again, so my brother wants to play video games every night with me, and I of course love doing that, and just I'm taking advantage of it. So I've found almost zero time to actually watch my own films, to watch what I want to watch when I want to watch them, and then to review them. So, if that explains to you, I thought I'd be doing way more reviewing, and I'm doing way less reviewing. But life is funny like that. You always think one thing is going to happen, and a lot of the times that's not what happens at all. Anyway, so moving on, I haven't recorded a review in 4 days for aforementioned things. We're moving on to Prisoners on the Denis Villeneuve filmography. So, what an incredible movie this is. This I would feel is probably his most well-regarded film if you were to just ask the general audience. Like, of all the movies that he's made, this is going to be the one that you're going to find the most praise for amongst just random everyday people, not film fans, not them too. I'm saying any demographic at all. This is probably going to be his most crowd-pleasing movie, if you will. So, and that's for good reason. I mean, these detective missing persons stories, when done well, they hit really big. Like, they hit really well with audiences, like a Gone Girl, of course, or even a Silence of the Lambs would fall under this umbrella. So, and that's technically, people classify that horror movie, and it, won Best Picture of the year. So, these kinds of movies, when done well, they really, really land with audiences, because I think they speak to most audiences. We can all relate to a missing persons. Like, even if we've never dealt with it, a lot of us haven't, we can at least understand the weight of that. We can at least understand, the urgency of finding them, and the anxieties and the fears and the frustrations and the anger and all of the emotions that would come from that. And the dynamics between the father and the mother, and their relationship during it, and then of course the detectives that play in, and everyone is just amazing here. I mean, now people get more screen time, definitely, but I do feel like everyone does get their time to shine. Something that I've definitely noticed within the Villeneuve filmography here is that he picks incredible talent to put in front of the camera, and he knows how to utilize their talents. I've seen movies where, I think this was one of my biggest problems with the movie Life, with Ryan Reynolds and so on. There's so much talent in that movie that I know can act, that I know that can portray all sorts, a multitude of different emotions and contexts and everything. And I feel like it's completely squandered in that movie. I feel like you have a bunch of talent, and they're not really used for any reason. I feel like you could have just cast whoever and done the movie almost identically the same. This movie, on the other hand, like, these actors have to give these performances for this movie to be as successful as it is. Now, better acting, of course, is going to boost any film, but these kinds of films that really need to pack that punch, he really gives it, and he gives it to everyone, and he knows how to direct them to have those emotional responses and those emotional moments. And man, oh man. I mean, who's better in this movie, Hugh Jackman or Jake Gyllenhaal? Probably Jackman, just because he has to play a bunch of different emotions here, and to varying degrees, of course. But Gyllenhaal kind of makes this his own, because if you read the trivia, if you read what's going on behind the scenes, the tattoos were his idea, the nervous tick was his idea, which, if you've met people who have served in the military or have been on law enforcement for a long time and they've seen a lot of crazy shit, they do develop nervous tics like that. It's just kind of like a PTSD response and whatnot. So really, really cool stuff. It gives the character background without giving the character background, just little emotional quirks like that. You can go, oh, this dude's seen some shit, like before he even has to say anything. So I think that adds to his character, and it's never overblown. It's never focused on. I don't think anyone ever even addresses it at all. It's just kind of there as a character trait. And, it's Hugh Jackman. It's Jake Gyllenhaal. He's one of my favorite actors working. So this is, of course, their second film together, with Enemy and Prisoners back to back. And they kill it together. Hopefully one day we'll see them work together again in the future. And I would of course, welcome that with open arms. Prisoners. The title itself, I feel like there's so many meanings within it. Who's the prisoner here? Really? I mean, is it the parents who are the prisoners of doubt and loss? Because as a parent, I can tell you, and this is my own take on it. Of course, everyone is going to have their own take on it, being a parent. But being a parent, I feel pretty confident that 99% of parents are going to agree with me on this. There's always going to be the odd man out. But there is a fate worse than death when it comes to having children. And that is your kids going missing and never finding out what happens to them. Now, of course, spoilers, obviously. We do get to find out what happens to the kids here. But every day that passes is another day that you are afraid that you'll never see them again. And your mind, we've talked about this on the channel, or should I say I've talked about this on the channel so many times in the past. But what we truly fear is the unknown, because our imagination is so much worse than most things could ever be. And even if your kid was off living the greatest life ever, I don't even know how that'd be possible, but anything's possible. Your mind's, of course, not going to go there. It's going to go to the most horrible of places, and you're never, ever, ever going to get closure. If your kid dies, yes, at least, and that's just it too. Like, I'm not saying you should do this. I'm not going to try to tell you how to live or how to deal with things. But let's say your kid dies, right? God, terrible thought, of course. But your kid dies, and you say, fuck it. Now, this is, of course, barring that you don't have any other children. So let's say your sole child dies, and that's it. There's a finality to it. And if you wanted to kill yourself, if you wanted to just go off into the wilderness and say fuck it all, and you wanted to move on in however you wanted to move on, you can do that, because there's closure there. They're dead. Like, it's a horrible closure, but it's a closure, and so you can move on in whatever way you decide. This, you can never move on from. Like, there's always going to be a chance. You can't give up. You can't go off into the wilderness. Well, you could, but most of us wouldn't. You can't kill yourself. You can't go off into the wilderness and be alone. You can't go on with your life and just say, oh, fuck it, I'll just, and go back to work, and I'll just, time will heal all wounds kind of shit. No. Every single day for the rest of your fucking life, until they're found, or, the truth is found, whether they lived or died or whatever happened to them, you're just going to be sitting there, and you're going to feel like they were gone. Like, what's happening to them? What's happening to them? One of the greatest moments in any film to me ever, I've talked about this on the channel before, I'm pretty sure, I think I have once or twice, is in The Vanishing with Kiefer Sutherland, Jeff Bridges, and Sandra Bullock. Really, really good movie. It's a remake, but I really like that. I've actually never seen the original, weirdly. But there's a scene in there where he breaks down and he's talking to his new girlfriend. because she thought he had given up on the search. He'd finally given it all up, and of course he was lying, so on and so forth. But he tells her, like, I have this like fantasy scenario where I'm allowed to pick. Now, of course, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm allowed to pick whether or not she's dead, and I get to find out, or she's alive and happy, and I never get to find out whatever happened to her. And I selfishly would pick, as I said, I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially gets to the point where he's like, you know, I feel terrible, but I would rather she's dead. I would rather she's dead so that I can get closure, because I can't live like this anymore. And that shit to me is one of the most true, horrible things that you could think. Because yes, like, you're sitting there, the selfishness of you are like, I mentally can't handle the stress of caring about this person anymore and wondering what's happening to them. I need to know what happened to them, and I'd rather they be dead and me find out than them be totally fucking happy and me never find out. It sounds horrible to think like that, but I completely understand what he's saying in that moment. Of course, we'd rather find out that they're happy. You know, we'd of course rather find out what happened to them and they're fucking alive and happy, but that's not the choices. And man, just like when you watch a movie like this, you realize that, like, every problem you have is inferior by comparison. It's nothing. Like, anything could be going on in your life. Any single thing could be going on in your life. I don't care what it is, you name it right now. I guarantee you it's not going to match up to you're out there and then you notice your kid's missing. I mean, as I said before, unless you're a total piece of shit parent who doesn't care about their kids at all, that's a totally different discussion. But a person who loves their kids, like most of us do, anything in the world could be going on. And if your kid went missing, that would instantly be the most important thing in the whole world. I don't give a fuck what else is happening. And in this moment, I remember seeing this in theaters. And when they're over at their friend's house and both their kids are missing, and they go outside and they're running around, and there's not even a lot of music, but there's so much fucking gut-wrenching tension in that sequence. You know the movie's about this. You know what's gonna happen. But Denis is so damn good at building tension in this scene that I was sick to my stomach watching it. Just putting my head, and of course give all the credit in the world to Hugh Jackman and to Terrence Howard and all the other actors in this scene as well, the moms as well. Just the amount of stress that I felt in that sequence. I felt like my kids were lost. I mean, this movie came out the year my kids were born, if I remember correctly, or the year after. They were 1. That's right. This is 2014, right? Yeah, they were born in 2013. So they were 1, and just, they were, of course, your kids, I don't know, are your kids, I don't think there's a time where they're more important to you. Like, as soon as they're alive, you're pretty much like, this is it. Like, they are the most important thing in the world to you. So I don't want to say they've grown in, but you do become a little more attached as time goes on, because you get to know them more and so on, and you get to develop personalities. But also in the beginning, they're so brand new, and you're so excited about them that, I don't know, you toss a coin on when you're more. But as I said, I think it kind of just evens out. You're always crazy about your children. This scene perfectly illustrates the fear, the anxiety, the tension that you would feel in that moment. Because we've all had this moment as a parent. We've all turned around in the store and your kid's missing for 5 seconds. You don't even see him for like a second, and your brain immediately is like, what the, and then there they are right next to you, and you're like, oh, and there's this, like, it takes like a couple minutes for your body to kind of readjust, because it's like, fucking body's like flooded with cortisol, and you're just like anxious as shit even for 1 millisecond. I mean, 1 second of not knowing where your kid is too much. Like, it's overbearing. And so that I don't want to harp on this too much or talk about this too much, but the anxiety during that scene is so real. And I've seen plenty of movies where kids go missing, and it's just not portrayed very well, and the acting is not very good, and the musical cues and everything. And it's the way when he walks outside, and it feels so vast. Like the kid could be anywhere, you know? Like, you look out in the world and you think, fuck. And then this kid's like, there was a camper and it was parked here, and it's like, you know, then your mind starts to turn, and you start thinking all these things. And then of course the kid goes missing, and this is when we get Loki, Detective Loki, and he comes to Keller and his wife, and he's talking to him about the case. And of course he's kind of just being a total normal cop in this situation. These guys have the worst thing ever going on with them, and Loki is kind of throwing platitudes and pleasantries at him. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the right move. I'm sure it's absolutely realistic as hell, and it's what they actually do in that. But for me, I think, of course, it always differs, right? For one person, that might work beautifully. And for another person, probably like me, that wouldn't work well at all. I'd be like, why are you talking to me about this shit? I feel like I can relate to Keller, you know, Hugh Jackman's character in this, more than most. Like, his response to things, his reaction to Loki's platitudes, as I had said. The way he kind of takes matters into his own hands when he doesn't think that things are getting done. Like, he has such... he's so committed to his belief once he hears... And I would be too, you know. Alex, Paul Dano's character here, what he says to him in that parking lot. You know, they didn't start crying until I left them, I think is what he says. I wrote it down somewhere. I'm not going off my notes, of course. I don't even know why I wrote notes for seriously any of these, but because they didn't cry till I left them. I think that's what I said, right? Well, whatever. But here's the tragedy of the film, and I think this is why this film works so well for me and maybe others. Because the main suspect of the movie is arguably the biggest victim of the film. I mean, almost everybody's a victim in this movie, outside of Melissa Leo's character, who's just dreadful. Just a horrible fucking human being, along with her husband. Obviously, those guys are trash, and I feel no sympathy for them in any way, shape, or form. But Alex, you're talking about... Now, was Alex... I don't remember if this is stated or not, if Alex was mentally handicapped or not. I think they do talk about this somewhere in the movie. Sorry, guys, I watched this movie like a week ago, and I've watched probably 15 films since. Now, you're going to go back in your head and be like, wait a minute, didn't he say he hasn't had a lot of time to watch movies? Oh, no, I've been watching a lot of movies. I watch a lot of movies with my kids, and I watch a lot of movies with my dad and my brother, but I've seen all these movies before, and they're not movies. A lot of them are movies already covered fully on the channel. But I've watched a fuck ton of stuff since I watched this. So anyways, regardless, whether or not he is very much mentally handicapped in this at this point. Now, that might have been through the abuse. I don't know. Now, how did Alex go to jail? How did they check his credentials and not realize that he was not actually a family member of the family who they released him to? That, I don't know. He was a missing kid. Did they have the proper paperwork? Did they just not look into it? Like, they would have looked back into this guy's background, like, to figure out who the hell he was. So for me, that's a little rocky, because obviously he was kidnapped as a kid by this family, and he's been living there. And he's picked up some traits along the way. I mean, he's torturing a fucking animal in one sequence when Keller's watching him before he goes and picks him up. But man, I mean, just to think that this poor kid, and along with that other guy who collects the snakes, these are tragic characters, because he's been inundated by these horrible people, brainwashed, and he has these horrible traits, and he doesn't speak much, and then he's horribly tortured. So not only is he tortured by this family who never let him go, but then like convinces him he's part of the family, but then he's taken by Keller and abused and tortured, and all the while we find out that this person was a victim like his child. That, like, imagine, in fast forward the clock 10 years, fast forward the clock 15 years, and someone in the future, if this didn't happen, his daughter is part of this family still, and she's taken by someone like Keller and punched in the face, and, you know, locked in a fucking little cupboard, you know, makeshift prison cell with hot water and cold water, where he's burning and freezing her out. Like, think about the tragedy of that little girl growing up and then being abused by some man who's looking for her kid. It's like, I was someone who was needed to be looked for, but these kids are so messed up. I mean, look at the guy whose house they break into, or he gets into, and he has the snakes, you know, and he kills himself. It's tragic. I mean, this whole tale is so tragic. And then you have the priest who was a pedophile, and he goes to check on him, and this guy has a body in the basement who ends up being the dad who kidnapped everybody. And this priest tried to, you know, get some kind of redemption through murdering somebody that, you know, admitted to him the same atrocities that he'd kind of committed. So he locked him in his basement and killed him, and he sat him in the basement for a long time. And this guy's been missing for a long time. Now, of course, you could argue that the movie's a little too convenient. The fact that he just so happened to find this guy's body, and that they were all connected, and that there's another guy who shows up at the, you know, but who gives a shit? I don't care about that kind of stuff. Like, it's a movie. Like, there's going to be some conveniences for the plot, and I'm fine with that as long as the embellishment serves the story well. So I'm completely fine with that. I think that that's all really well done. Another fantastic movie similar to this, I would say 2002-ish, 2001, Mystic River, with Sean Penn, and the list goes. I mean, it's just a ridiculous cast, but it kind of reminds me of this as well. Fantastic film, just excellent movie. So yeah, if you for some reason haven't seen Mystic River and you love Prisoners, please check that one out. I don't hear enough people talk about it. Like, even though it was a big deal when it came out, and I think it might have been up for Best Picture. I know Sean Penn won Best Actor for it, but I think, yeah, it was up for Best Picture. I never hear anybody talk about it anymore, ever. And but yeah, I mean, and then the confrontation at the end, and when he goes to this woman's house and she locks him in this hole, and you know, Loki comes, and Loki's just there in the nick of time. I mean, now the question that I have is why this woman didn't just push the plunger down. Because she thinks that she is... I'm not really understanding her reasoning, like what her husband and hers reasoning was. It seems like she was kind of a sheep and he was the leader. and that she kind of just kept his work going after his disappearance. How does it feel, bitch? Um, but her reasoning was essentially that it was like God's work, and that the parents turned into these demons, these you know, they let their vengeance get the best of them, something like that. I'm not really sure, honestly, what her reasoning was, but they're just psychotic. That's good enough reason for me. I would definitely like to know more into it. I know people said there's a lot of symbolism in this movie and this and that. So I'm sure if I watch like an explaining video, there might be a little more depth to her character and her reasoning, with the snakes and all of that. But anyway, we'll just say she's a fucking nutcase because she is. But Loki comes in, catches her in the nick of time. She has the needle in the arm, which already breaks this girl in, where she goes into like shock, and she's you know, foaming at the mouth and whatnot. But she had the chance. She had the plunger right there, and she knew she was gonna die. Like, she was like, "Don't put me in a casket," whatever. She knows she's gonna die when she turns around. So in that moment, if she was already committed to killing the kid, why didn't she just push the plunger down and finish the job? I'm glad she didn't. And this movie kind of has a happy ending, I suppose. I mean, he does hear the whistle. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Keller is found. Now, there's another angle of this movie. I feel really bad for Maria Bello's character in this, who's not a huge part of the movie. I feel like she's kind of sidelined. You've got Terrence Howard and Viola Davis. I like that Viola Davis's character in this is kind of more into torturing this guy and more into smacking him around than her husband is. Like, you would think she'd come over and be like, "What are you guys doing?" She's like, "Bitch, tell me what's up." Which, yeah, I mean, hell hath no fury, right? So I definitely think that is very believable. But I feel really, really bad. I feel really bad for pretty much everybody but the killers. But yeah, his wife in this, her daughter's missing, and then she finds out that her husband's been torturing this guy, so lying to her behind her back, and then she has to find out her daughter's found finally, but at a moment her daughter's still missing and her husband is missing, and if he's found, he's going to prison. So like, she's in a horrible state. Dylan Mignette's character in this, the son, there's some good moments with him where he yells at him in the room and all that stuff. We can't explore too much. I mean, the movie'd have to be 3-4 hours long to explore every single character. So I think they add enough to the family dynamic to matter. But I can't say that they're extremely essential. It just adds a little bit more. Like, it makes the more family elements more believable. But yeah, I mean, I wrote so many notes, and I'm seriously not going. For me, with these movies, I almost feel like the notes are there to just kind of put them in my mind to talk later. A lot of the times I do read my notes, but in this, I really just feel like I want to talk more about the emotions of the movie. Like, I don't really have as much to say about scenes in the movie. Like, a lot of times I like to point out silly things and whatnot. That's why I'll write these things down. But in movies like this, I'm just so absorbed and so invested and engaged. There's so much thought-provoking stuff that goes on in these movies that I can't help but just want to express my emotional responses to everything within the movie, so much more so than the actual filmmaking side of things, which is also excellent and I could gush about as well. But I think what I take from it more than a film fan is as a human. This is more of a human response to these movies, more so than like, holy shit, look at the structure of this film, look at the cinematography, look at all of that stuff. That's all phenomenal. It's just that I I love the emotional connection I have to everything in this. And of course, I mean, this, I don't know if this is the first film he worked with Roger Deakins on. I don't think I have Enemy here to see if he did or not, but I want to say he did this one first and then Enemy. So then it would be the first time he worked with him, because before this it was Incendies, and I don't think that he worked with him on that. I would be surprised. So the cinematography, of course, is fantastic. Everything about this movie is fantastic. 10 out of 10. I have no complaints about this movie at all. And I think that's about it. So let's move on.